What's up, Mark? We just
How's it
like to
going?
talk about non-consensus things like taxes in the middle of the summer rather than tax season. Just another example of how early we like to be here at C Club.
Amazing. Well, I mean, you can fill your taxes now. You can file them early. Or I'm sure there's probably some of your listeners who are filing
Oh,
them
I'm
late.
sure. I'm sure there is. Yeah.
This guy.
Uh,
Nice. So, Mark, you're an investor at Haun Ventures, backing founders building the next generation of crypto native applications. So, yeah, I want to start off. So, you've been building in Ethereum since I think 2016. Was really a consensus. Built one of the first smart contract protocols that hit $1 million in TVL, which is sick. And I kind of feel like a bunch of the early ETH people are like disillusioned with the state of crypto today, or like think nothing interesting is getting built anymore. So I'm curious to get your like high level take on the state of things today. Like, are you excited for the future of crypto?
Yeah, there's a few. I want to break this question into two pieces. Maybe three pieces. So I think there's like a burnout cycle that most people go through in crypto. And my hunch is actually people in the 2017, 18, 19 cycle era were really burnt out last cycle and are now really recharged and are re-entering. So I'm seeing a lot of those folks who I met way back when who are now like professionally re-engaging with the ecosystem in a way they haven't before. And then conversely, the 2020, 21, 22 cycle folks, they're the ones who are like the most burnt out right now. And they're feeling a lot of the same thing I think the 19 cycle people were feeling in 21. And so I think this is like just par for the course. And I think that's like just part of the healthy crypto ecosystem of people get washed out and then they, hopefully come back in as they sort of remember the values that brought them in the first place. Going back to your original question about like, am I bullish on crypto? I actually am on the, applications and in terms of the ecosystem. I think there's a lot of old metas that are dying. I think that there is a reconfiguration of the market that we're in the midst of. But I think, and we have these categories where we have these like category leaders now, where it feels to a lot of people like the ecosystem is ossified. But I just don't think that that's true. I think there is obviously some categories where, there's like large products that dominate and probably will continue to dominate. And so competing in those markets is going to be tougher, but there's still so much greenfield space from like a protocol design perspective, from when you think about like what are the different problem spaces in the world that crypto systems stand to improve, there's still like a massive opportunity there. And so I think people are focusing in the wrong domains. And so there's parts of the map that look really crowded, but there's all this greenfield space no one's really paying attention to. And so for me now on the investing side, that's a lot of the fun I get, is to talk with folks who are building out there in the fringes and hopefully doing something interesting.
yeah, I like that. Am I burnt out, Josh?
I think every other week.
Yeah, right. Okay, so I just go.
Shorter cycle. We just operate in shorter cycles here.
Short.
Yeah.
So earlier this year, you wrote a post called "Why the Community is Not the Product." Where you highlight how much the required intrinsic motivations of community are, the extrinsic incentives of tokens, etc. Is the takeaway from that post that crypto products should stop deluding themselves into thinking that they're actually building for community, or do you think the community building is an important function, but tokens just shouldn't be involved in it?
I think, and I published that post really after sitting on it for a while, because I wasn't, and I didn't leave that post feeling extremely confident with the sort of thesis or where it ended, because to be very frank, like I don't have clear answers to a lot of these questions, and I don't want to pretend that I do. I think sitting here today, my feeling is definitely that communities are valuable in terms of like they bring value to people's lives, and I think that intrinsic communities can and will exist around different types of technologies or even like companies or protocols. And so my argument is mainly that like that thing, this like naturally occurring thing that is closer to like a flower, you can't try to hammer into it and build with it, right? Or use it as like a foundation in your house. It's like sort of something different. And so you have the house and then you have your garden in the backyard, and both of these things like complement each other really beautifully. And so that would be kind of how I would think about a token-oriented organization or ecosystem being the house, and then this garden being this other thing that is really beautiful, but can be like wild and can kind of grow on its own terms and doesn't have to be either co-opted by the specific goals of the organization or like controlled by the incentives that the organization is like imbuing into that community. I think the best communities are ones that form naturally, and I think that was kind of the the core point.
So I got to get your take on InfoFi right now, because it feels like that is like the thing that's running directly at this, right? The idea that we can create some incentives for people to go talk about it, and then there's this sort of patina of community, right? A lot of people writing, a lot of likes on tweets, etc. And I can almost look at we do a bunch of posting on the C Club account, and all of a sudden something pops off, and if I go to Kaido, I'm like, oh, they have a campaign going on there. So and obviously there's sort of this challenge, right? That the it seems like we're playing in such a thin world here where we don't really have a lot. Most users don't have a lot to go on. And so vanity metrics actually seem to still have a lot of weight or value in the sort of average token purchasers sort of conviction building. So I don't know if there's even a question in there. What thoughts on InfoFi? Question mark.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like you mentioned, the first protocol I built was like the bounties network, right? So I've been seeing the way that bounties and incentives can be used to stimulate a community for a while. And from the very beginning, it was clear that there is a healthy way to do that, and a way that maybe is sort of short-term healthy, but long-term not very healthy, more like a junk food than like a kale salad. And so social media bounties, have obviously been around for a while. I think, my rough framing on this is like, unless that social media bounty is part of some longer journey that is bringing those people deeper into your community to, or your product experience or whatever, in order to ultimately actually engage organically, unless that is the final outcome that you're moving towards, I don't see it as like very healthy. And in fact, it's like probably in the long term unhealthy. The other thing that I can say now is like, when I was a founder and I would be like building, right, I was like, I don't want to, get a bunch of bot followers or fake users or whatever, because that just is a waste of time. As a product builder, you're going to muddy all your metrics. You're not going to be able to test anything properly. But then I would see competitors, right, who would do this. And I would, as a founder, I'd be like so annoyed and just like angry that this was the state of the market. And now on the venture side, especially in like 2025, right, the market's maturing substantially. And I think people are just much more aware about the state of the ecosystem now. I made a joke on Twitter the other day that like when I see a new Twitter protocol, or a new protocol on Twitter where they have like 500K followers and hundreds of thousands of users, and I have no mutuals with them. And the joke I made is like, it might as well be 500 CCs. And it's like, that is true. Like most people see these things and are like, oh, this is not natural. This is not organic. And like, in O of one time, anybody with like any kind of experience in the ecosystem can tell. And as the ecosystem matures, and people think about crypto crossing the chasm to like more institutional purchasers, or even people who are kind of retail traders but who are just like more sophisticated, they're not idiots. And so I think there's a lot of these, when I say these like old metas are dying, this is kind of a lot of what I'm talking about, where people's entire marketing strategies are oriented around farming engagement in this way. And that might have worked like a year or two ago when they completed those fundraisers and wrote those plans. But for any teams listening that are currently executing in that way, I would strongly advise you to recalibrate to the current state of the market, rather than pushing on, because you're just going to waste your time and your money.
I mean, I think it's like paid acquisition versus organic acquisition and just like, web 2, right? It's like, if you're like, what you want to see in paid acquisition, obviously, is that, the payback period is, the LTV is higher than the payback period. And you want to ultimately see like a halo effect, right? When I spend more, I see more organic usage. I think the challenge with InfoFi, a lot of the stuff we see in crypto, is it's done in the absence of like any retention or real business or like way to pull people in. So you just kind of see this, like, it's just empty vanity metrics leading to nowhere.
Exactly. And I think increasingly retention is one of the primary, metrics that I look at. And I think in general, people look for is, if you have TVL, right, or deposits, how sticky are those deposits, right? Or are they just sort of mercenary, coming in for the short term? Retention's king. And yeah. So, and the key is like, if you have really high retention, you can pay this high CAC, right? And I think, the thing that's interesting about crypto is this worldview of like, instead of spending a lot of money on ads or activations, right, that CAC can go like directly to users or something. I think that hypothesis is still being kind of played out in terms of how does this actually function on the ground, and does it work? But I do have hope that there are interesting models around, giving value back to users directly, rather than to like large advertising companies that intermediate that relationship.
Yeah, and I think, Josh, the example of paid acquisition is a bit different, because I mean, it would be like paid acquisition to get followers or fans or subscribers, as opposed to paid acquisition to get transacting users. And I think the issue is you can go in, like, there's a net negative at some point if you're unable to sustain some sense of organic growth. And it's like the 500,000 Twitter followers type of thing. If I scroll down and I see you get 700 views on each of your posts, like there's just no way you're getting that trust back from me. And yet maybe there was a window there where you were actually getting a ton of views on it because there was that attention there. So I think it's a lot more insidious than maybe a paid campaign in Web2 would be, because of the importance of trust, of social capital, and the value of these sort of things, and how easy it is ultimately to suss out the truth from the
I think
loser.
maybe like the Quest platforms are a better comp to like paid ads than InfoFi. Yeah.
But they love to just say, well, make sure you follow us on Twitter first before you go do it. And I think that is just a cardinal sin.
True. So Mark, you wrote another piece called "The Token is the Product," which I really liked because of how provocative it was, but also how I think true it was to the state of the industry. So you wrote it a year ago and really argued that tokens are actually are more strategically important than the software product itself, and teams typically undervalue token GTM and attention and like kind of longer term attention generating strategies on their token. So I'm curious if you've updated your thinking on this now that we kind of are drowning in subsystemless tokens, especially within like this internet capital markets meta, or like, the high float, low FDV kind of infra stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe I got that back. I flipped that around, but yeah, anyways, curious if you've updated your thinking or if it still holds true.
It generally holds true. I mean, I think the context that I wrote that post in was, that I had been like a product builder my whole life. Obviously, I'd cross paths with you folks, and in general, this kind of corner of the crypto ecosystem was so averse to the idea of selling your token, right? And just like the act that and the series of activities it takes to like get your token sold, right, and marketed to people. I think people often underestimate the amount of work that happens behind the scenes in traditional capital markets, or even in crypto markets, to actually just circulate information about tokens and why they're interesting and why they're valuable, why they have a future. And so my original sort of aha moment was, okay, instead of just viewing this as the kind of thing that Justin Sun does and these kind of like random body scammy crypto protocols, that this is actually a core ingredient to any successful crypto protocol, like the well-functioning ones, the healthy ones. And I very strongly stand by that. I think as time goes on, it's becoming clear that tokens are this incredible balance sheet expansion technology that allows for this kind of CAC, to be sort of minted out of thin air. And thanks to liquidity pools, if people aren't always selling, you can spend that CAC before you've earned the LTV. And so I think that's like a core quality of what tokens offer product builders. And I think that is only going to continue to be true. I think, one of the things that I'm looking at and, based here in SF, we're thinking about is all these different traditional startups that are not crypto native. Now that the regulatory regime is a little bit clearer, we see so many folks starting to think about, okay, well, how could I include token economy or token-based business model into this existing system that maybe is struggling to grow. And if we think about tokens as this like growth gasoline, right, and this balance sheet expansion tool, it becomes much clearer like how this tool fits into a traditional startup builder's toolkit. And so I think we're going to continue to see more non-crypto native folks sort of just coming in and immediately being able to grok, okay, here's how I can use this thing to grow my protocol or to grow my ecosystem. And they don't necessarily have to worry as much about, some of the old metas again around, I have to launch this token with these market makers, and then I have to pay this much for exchange listings and blah, blah, blah. Because the truth of the matter is like, obviously it's great to have some liquidity in your token. And so some market making incentives maybe are necessary at the limit, but like, on a long enough time horizon, if your protocol is great, exchanges will list you organically because they want the volume. And as exchange competition heats up more and more, I think that's only going to continue being true. So all that's to say, like
tokens as balance sheet expanding technology is great.
I already tweeted it. I was like, that's
I saw your face and I was like, it's just tweeting this right now.
I'm tweeting it.
Yeah, that's really, I mean, you guys know I'm like a VC now. So all I do is think about balance sheets. And the two primary things on my mind these days are like tokens are balance sheet expansion technology and Bitcoin on the balance sheet, which is a totally separate corner of crypto, but is also just a meme that is constantly coming up. And I think will continue coming up this year and perhaps even next, as just like so many organizations are thinking about, this question of like, do I have Bitcoin on the balance sheet? How do I get Bitcoin on the balance sheet? Bitcoin denominated balance sheets or certain lines. That's the sort of talk of the town, at least that I'm seeing on the sort of more institutional side.
Yeah, I love it. We didn't even get into your whole transition into VC, so I think we'll have to get you back on. This is great, Mark. Appreciate you jumping on and passionately describing the color behind a bunch of your posts that I think have been really wonderful. So yeah, make sure you go give Mark a follow. He writes good shit, and you'll get smarter for it. Thanks for hanging out, man.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you all. Chat soon.
Cheers.
Peace.